a daughter's 7th birthday, an Easter celebration, a mother who ran over her children's father while they watched, then stood in court laughing at capital murder charges. One family gathering transformed into a nightmare that no child should ever witness. On Easter Sunday, April 20th, 2025, in Birmingham, Alabama, what should have been a day of happiness became the setting for a tragedy that would leave 5 children without their father and a community searching for answers. A combined Easter celebration and birthday party, a double celebration that ended with a man pinned between us said there's a few good men left. He was one of them. Bostic's commitment to family extended beyond biological ties. He had 3 children with Shatice Jackson, but also embraced her 2 children from previous relationships as his own. His family described him as a man with a big heart who worked non-stop to provide for his children. On social media, Bostic frequently shared photos of family gatherings and children's milestones. The Easter celebration and birthday party he was hosting the day he died further illustrates his commitment to creating meaningful family moments. Shatice Renae Jackson's life story followed a different trajectory. Originally from Virginia, 30-year-old, Jackson had moved to Birmingham, Alabama relatively recently. According to social media posts and family statements, she worked for the government, though the specific agency and role have not been publicly identified. Jackson's relationship with Bostic appeared, at least online, to have moments of genuine connection and appreciation. In February 2025, just 2 months before the tragedy, she posted effusively about Bostic moving the family into a larger home. "Best Valentine's Day gift ever. This man moved us into a bigger and better house. 5 bedrooms, 2 full baths. Hell. Basically 2 living rooms, upstairs, downstairs, a huge backyard. I couldn't ask for anything better. I don't even want nothing else today. This was more than enough. Thank you, Daddy. We love you with everything in us. I have some making up to do." The post, which tagged Bostic, painted a picture of gratitude and affection. It suggested a relationship where material security was valued and provided, a man fulfilling traditional provider roles and being publicly acknowledged for it. But Jackson's life in Alabama was relatively isolated from her extended family support system. While Bostic had numerous family members in Birmingham, Jackson's family remained in Virginia. This geographical separation may have contributed to power imbalances and tensions within the relationship. According to reports, during family gatherings, Jackson was often outnumbered by Bostic's relatives, a dynamic that would later be cited as her reason for bringing a firearm to understand a tragedy, we must first understand the people at its center. Behind the shocking headlines and disturbing courtroom footage are real lives, complex individuals with histories, dreams, and relationships that tell a deeper story than any news report could capture. Mickese James Bostic wasn't just a victim in a sensational crime. He was a 27-year-old man who had built his life around service and family. For nearly 9 years, essentially his entire adult life, Bostic had worked within the Jefferson County juvenile justice system. According to county officials, he began working with the county as soon as he graduated high school, showing an early commitment to stability and public service. As a juvenile detention officer, Bostic worked in a challenging environment that required patience, emotional regulation, and dedication. A spokesperson for Jefferson County released a statement saying, "This is obviously an extremely difficult time for his family, friends, and colleagues. We are praying for all involved. She would do him so cruel, it's so wrong, it's not fair, it's not right," one of Bostic's aunts told reporters, her voice breaking with emotion. "But he's a good person." Another aunt added, "He was going to provide for his family, and he's going to do the things that he needed to do for his family. Long time ago, they said there's a few good men left. He was one of them." Bostic's commitment to family extended beyond biological ties. He had 3 children with Shatice Jackson, but also embraced her 2 children from previous relationships as his own. His family described him as a man with a big heart who worked non-stop to provide for his children. On social media, Bostic frequently shared photos of family gatherings and children's milestones. The Easter celebration and birthday party he was hosting the day he died further illustrates his commitment to creating meaningful family moments. The children at the center of this tragedy, 5 young lives caught between 2 adults in conflict, now face a future without their father and with their mother behind bars. The 3 biological children Jackson and Bostic shared, plus the 2 children from Jackson's previous relationships that Bostic had embraced, range in age from toddlers to elementary school-aged. Their daughter, whose 7th birthday would have been celebrated the day after Easter, now has a birthday forever linked to her father's violent death. Police reports indicate that the children may have been inside the vehicle when Jackson allegedly ran over Bostic. Bostic's sister, Catherine Bostic, told Elle.com that the couple's children were inside the vehicle when their father was run over. This crucial detail would later elevate the charges against Jackson to capital murder under Alabama law, which specifically recognizes the traumatic impact on children who witness the killing of a parent or guardian. The relationship between Jackson and Bostic had shown signs of strain before Easter Sunday 2025. Reports indicate that both parties had been involved in domestic incidents, the pattern familiar to domestic violence experts: escalating tensions, police calls that resolve without arrests, temporary separations followed by reconciliations, appears to have been present. What's particularly striking about this case is a parallel tragedy involving another woman connected to Bostic. In March 2022, Raven Thompson, described as Bostic's former partner, was arrested for capital murder under eerily similar circumstances. Thompson allegedly shot and killed 26-year-old Tamia Morton, a mother of three, while the victim's children witnessed the murder. This incident, occurring just 3 years before Jackson would be charged with killing Bostic, resulted in Thompson facing the same charge that Jackson now faces: capital murder elevated because children witnessed the killing of a parent. Beyond the core family, the extended connections between Jackson and Bostic reveal additional complexities. Jackson's mother, Shatice Jackson, had experienced her own tragedy in May 2024 when her partner, Ronaldo Fletcher, died in a car accident at age 45 after his SUV collided with an 18-wheeler truck on Tallapoosa Street. This recent loss may have affected family dynamics and Jackson's emotional state in the months leading up to Easter 2025. The more we examine the lives behind the headlines, the more we see that this tragedy didn't emerge from nowhere. It grew from a complex web of relationships, past traumas, geographic isolation, and possibly unaddressed tensions. Understanding these factors doesn't excuse violence, but it helps explain how a celebration could transform into a crime scene, how a father could be killed in front of his children, and how a mother could smile in court while facing charges that could send her to death row. Easter Sunday, April 20th, 2025, began like any holiday celebration in the Bostic household. The home on Lisa Lane in Birmingham, Alabama, was decorated for the double occasion: Easter festivities and the upcoming 7th birthday of Mickese and Shatice's daughter. Family members arrived throughout the day, bringing food, gifts, and holiday cheer. By mid-afternoon, approximately 50 people had gathered to celebrate. What should have been a joyous occasion would soon unravel into tragedy through a series of escalating confrontations that culminated in Mickese Bostic's death. The first signs of trouble began in the early afternoon. According to police reports and witness statements, Shatice Jackson had invited a co-worker to the celebration. This seemingly mundane detail would prove to be the catalyst for the day's first conflict. At some point during the gathering, Jackson's co-worker accidentally hit a vehicle belonging to one of Bostic's family members, causing minor damage. What might have been resolved as a simple accident instead spiraled into a heated argument. Jackson stepped in when tensions rose between her co-worker and Bostic's relatives. The situation escalated to the point where someone called the Birmingham Police Department to report a domestic disturbance. When officers arrived at the Lisa Lane residence, they spoke with both Jackson and Bostic. After assessing the situation, they determined that nothing criminal had taken place. It was simply a verbal argument that had gotten out of hand, the kind of family dispute that police encounter regularly during holiday gatherings. Officers left the scene, considering the matter resolved. Following this initial police visit, Jackson also left the residence. According to family members, she was upset about the confrontation and needed space to cool down. Hours passed as the celebration continued without her. Text messages recovered later showed that Bostic had reached out to Jackson about getting the children's school clothes ready for the following day. As evening approached, Jackson returned to the Lisa Lane home. But this time, witnesses say, she came prepared for confrontation. According to police reports, Jackson brought a firearm with her, later telling investigators she felt the need for protection because she was outnumbered by Bostic's family members at the gathering. Upon entering the house, the tension that had been simmering throughout the day erupted. Witnesses reported hearing Jackson and Bostic arguing loudly. The precise subject of their disagreement remains unclear, but it quickly escalated beyond words. In a moment that stunned the partygoers, Jackson allegedly discharged her firearm inside the home. No shots were fired once police were on the scene. Birmingham police officer Truman Fitzgerald later clarified to reporters, indicating that the reported gunshots occurred before police arrived for the second time. Fortunately, no one was struck by bullets during this frightening escalation. The sound of gunfire sent the celebration into chaos. Parents grabbed children and sought cover, while some family members tried to intervene in the argument between Jackson and Bostic. In the confusion that followed, Jackson exited the house and got into her SUV. Some reports indicate that her children were already in the vehicle or got into it with her at this time. What happened next transformed a family dispute into a homicide investigation. Witnesses told police that Jackson got behind the wheel of her SUV and deliberately drove into Bostic, pinning him between the vehicle and the exterior wall of his own home. The impact was devastating, crushing Bostic against the structure with such force that responding emergency personnel would be unable to save him. Bostic's sister, Catherine, later described the scene to Al.com as awful. She recounted how family members tried desperately to save her brother, but couldn't free him from where he was pinned. Most disturbingly, she claimed that the couple's children were inside the vehicle when their father was run over. Officers rushed to the scene around 10 p.m., after receiving reports of a woman attempting to run over a man. What they encountered upon arrival was described by one official as chaos. With approximately 50 people still at the party, many now hysterical, screaming or trying to help Bostic, police called what they termed a max emergency because they couldn't control the distraught crowd. The response was massive. More than 25 police units responded from 4 different precincts across Birmingham. Birmingham Fire and Rescue Service personnel also arrived quickly, working frantically to extricate Bostic from between the vehicle and the house. Despite these efforts, Mickese James Bostic was pronounced dead at the scene at 10:21 p.m. He was just 27 years old. As investigators began processing the crime scene, they faced the difficult task of interviewing dozens of traumatized witnesses, many of whom were related to either the victim or the suspect. Multiple witnesses described seeing Jackson behind the wheel of the SUV that struck Bostic. Several stated that she had appeared angry and had been arguing with Bostic just moments before. Jackson was arrested at the scene and taken into custody. She was booked into the Birmingham City Jail and placed on a 48-hour felony hold, standard procedure for serious violent crimes that allows investigators time to gather evidence before formal charges are filed. Easter Sunday, 2025 in Birmingham was meant to be a day of celebration, renewal and family togetherness. Instead, it became a day marked by violence, death and profound trauma that will reverberate through the lives of all involved, especially the children who lost their father and now face the prospect of losing their mother to the criminal justice system as well. Within 48 hours of Mickese Bostic's death, prosecutors made a significant decision that would shape everything to follow, charging Shatice Renae Jackson with capital murder rather than a lesser homicide offense. This distinction is crucial in Alabama law, where capital murder represents the most severe category of homicide. It's reserved for specific circumstances that the legislature has determined are particularly egregious, deserving of the harshest punishments available: life imprisonment without the possibility of parole or death by lethal injection. Alabama law identifies approximately 40 different circumstances under which an intentional murder can be elevated to capital murder. Among these circumstances is one that directly applies to the Bostic case: the killing of a parent witnessed by their child under the age of 14. The legal rationale behind this specific provision recognizes the profound psychological harm inflicted on children who witness the violent death of a parent. Beyond punishing the perpetrator for the murder itself, this enhancement acknowledges the additional trauma created when children observe such violence, trauma that experts say can have lifelong consequences for their psychological well-being. Under Alabama law, conviction on capital murder charges leaves only 2 sentencing options: life imprisonment without the possibility of parole or the death penalty. Unlike other homicide cases where parole might eventually be possible, these sentences are permanent. For a death sentence to be imposed, prosecutors must prove beyond a reasonable doubt what's called an aggravating circumstance that makes the crime particularly heinous. One possibility in this case could be heinous, atrocious and cruel conduct, such as if the perpetrator pinned the victim and continued accelerating rather than causing an instant death. Days after the killing, Jackson made her first appearance in court before Judge William Bell. What struck many observers wasn't just the severity of the charges, but Jackson's demeanor as she faced them. Dressed in a green and white striped jumpsuit, with braids only on one side of her head and the other side seemingly shaved, Jackson was seen smiling and at times appearing to laugh during the proceedings. This behavior raised immediate questions. Was it a sign of callousness? A failure to grasp the severity of her situation? A psychological defense mechanism? Or perhaps something else entirely? Courtroom behavioral analysts note that inappropriate emotional responses in high-stress legal situations can stem from various sources. Some defendants smile or laugh due to extreme anxiety, which can trigger incongruent emotional responses. Others may exhibit such behavior as a psychological defense mechanism, an attempt to distance themselves from the overwhelming reality they face. Still others may suffer from underlying mental health conditions that affect their ability to respond appropriately to serious situations. Whatever the cause of Jackson's courtroom behavior, it could potentially impact how she's perceived if her case reaches a jury trial. However, the jury selection process would likely aim to exclude potential jurors who have been exposed to media coverage of her courtroom demeanor. As the case progresses, Jackson's defense team will likely explore several potential strategies. One approach might involve arguing for a reduced charge of manslaughter based on heat of passion, the legal concept that a person can be provoked to such an extent that they temporarily lose control of their actions. This would require demonstrating that Bostic provoked Jackson in some way that would cause a reasonable person to lose self-control. However, certain facts of the case may complicate this defense strategy. Specifically, the fact that Jackson left the scene after the initial altercation and then returned later with a firearm might be interpreted as evidence of premeditation rather than a spontaneous emotional reaction. The longer she had to calm down before returning to the scene, the more difficult it becomes to argue for a heat of passion defense. Another potential defense avenue involves exploring Jackson's mental state at the time of the incident. If there's evidence of significant mental health issues that affected her capacity to understand the nature of her actions or to conform her conduct to the law, this could potentially lead to a finding of diminished capacity or, in extreme cases, not guilty by reason of mental disease or defect. However, mental incompetence is an extremely difficult standard to meet in criminal proceedings. Very few defendants are found mentally incompetent to stand trial, as the threshold typically requires such severe impairment that the person cannot understand the proceedings against them or assist in their own defense. On the legal complexities, this case highlights disturbing patterns of escalation in domestic violence. Experts in family violence note that lethal outcomes rarely occur without warning signs. Instead, they typically represent an escalation of previous conflicts and tensions. The fact that police had been called to the residence earlier that day, even though no criminal activity was determined at that time, fits this pattern of escalation. Domestic violence specialists point out that the most dangerous period in abusive relationships often occurs when one party perceives a loss of control, such as when conflicts occur in front of family members, potentially causing embarrassment or loss of face. The public nature of the Easter gathering, with approximately 50 witnesses, may have contributed to the escalation. Perhaps the most heartbreaking aspect of this case involves the children who may have witnessed their father's death. Child psychologists, who specialize in trauma, explain that witnessing the violent death of a parent can cause profound and lasting psychological damage. Children exposed to such extreme trauma often experience post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, anxiety, sleep disturbances, and difficulties in school and relationships. The developmental level of the child impacts how they process such trauma. Younger children may struggle to understand the permanence of death or may blame themselves for the violence. Older children may develop anger issues, engage in risk-taking behaviors, or become fearful of forming close relationships. All of these responses represent normal reactions to abnormal traumatic circumstances. Recovery from such trauma typically requires specialized therapeutic interventions, often for years, as well as stable, supportive caregiving. Unfortunately, in cases where one parent has killed the other, children lose both parents simultaneously, one to death and the other to incarceration. This compounds their loss and complicates their healing journey. As this case proceeds through the legal system, prosecutors will face challenges related to witness testimony. With approximately 50 people present at the scene, many of whom were related to either Bostic or Jackson, accounts may vary significantly. Trauma can affect memory formation and recall, leading to inconsistencies even among honest witnesses. The chaotic emotional nature of the scene further complicates matters, as does the family relationship between many witnesses and either the victim or the accused. In the days following Mickese Bostic's death, 5 children faced a reality no child should ever confront. With their father gone and their mother behind bars, these young lives entered a system unprepared for the complexity of their trauma. Initially placed in police custody, the children would soon face decisions about their long-term care, decisions complicated by the very nature of their loss. When both parents are suddenly removed from children's lives, one through death and one through incarceration, the impact is devastating. For these 5 children, ranging from toddlers to elementary school age, the trauma is compounded by potentially witnessing the violent death of their father at the hands of their mother. The daughter, whose 7th birthday was scheduled for the day after the tragedy, now has a milestone forever linked to unimaginable loss. Child welfare experts note that in such cases, placement with extended family members is typically preferred to foster care. However, the family dynamics in this case, with tensions between maternal and paternal relatives evident even before the murder, make such arrangements particularly challenging. Ultimately, the Department of Human Resources must make decisions based on the children's best interests, considering factors like stability, support for their emotional needs, and maintaining connections with both sides of their family when appropriate and safe. Beyond the immediate family, the Birmingham community has responded with both shock and sorrow. The Jefferson County Juvenile Detention System, where Bostic worked for nearly 9 years, mourns the loss of a dedicated colleague. Community leaders have called for increased attention to domestic violence prevention, using this tragedy as a catalyst for broader conversations about recognizing and addressing warning signs before they escalate to violence. Capital murder cases in Alabama follow a distinct legal path. After initial charges are filed, the case typically goes before a district court judge for a preliminary hearing to determine if probable cause exists. This hearing provides the defense with an opportunity to learn more about the evidence against their client. Following this, the case is bound over to a grand jury, which decides whether to indict the defendant on the charges. If indicted for capital murder, the case proceeds to circuit court for trial. The entire process, from arrest to trial, often takes approximately 2 years, though each case varies. During this time, the defendant typically remains in custody without bond, as Jackson is now. At trial, prosecutors must prove beyond a reasonable doubt not only that the defendant committed murder, but also that the specific circumstances elevating it to capital murder, in this case, children witnessing their parents' killing, were present. If convicted, the case enters a penalty phase where the jury recommends either life without parole or the death penalty, with the judge making the final determination. This case highlights critical warning signs of escalating domestic violence that too often go unrecognized until tragedy strikes. Domestic violence experts identify several red flags that were potentially present in this case. Previous disputes requiring police intervention, arguments in front of family members, leaving and returning to the scene of a conflict, and bringing a weapon into a volatile situation. Research consistently shows that access to firearms significantly increases the lethality risk in domestic violence situations. The alleged use of a firearm before the vehicle assault represents a dangerous escalation that, in retrospect, signaled imminent danger. For those in potentially dangerous domestic situations, resources exist that could help prevent similar tragedies. Crisis hotlines provide 24/7 support and safety planning for those experiencing abuse. Community organizations offer emergency shelter, legal advocacy, and counseling services. Law enforcement can assist with protective orders, though these require consistent enforcement to be effective. Prevention also depends on bystander intervention, family members, friends, and neighbors recognizing warning signs and taking appropriate action. This might include offering support to those in volatile relationships, connecting them with resources, or contacting authorities when violence seems imminent. The ripple effects of Bostic's death extend far beyond the immediate family. His colleagues at the Juvenile Detention Center have lost a valued team member. The children he worked with have lost a positive adult influence. His extended family has lost a loved one described as having a big heart who was committed to providing for his family. Perhaps most profound is the generational impact this violence may have. Children who witness domestic homicide carry that trauma into their own relationships as they mature. Without appropriate intervention and support, they face increased risks of behavioral problems, academic difficulties, and potentially continuing cycles of violence in their own adult relationships. Mickese Bostic's legacy should be more than the tragic circumstances of his death. Those who knew him describe a dedicated father who embraced not only his biological children, but also his girlfriends, children from previous relationships. They speak of his work ethic, his commitment to service through his role in juvenile detention, and his desire to create meaningful celebrations for his family, like the Easter gathering and birthday celebration that would tragically become his final day. As a community and society, we must ask ourselves difficult questions when tragedies like this occur. How can we better recognize the warning signs of escalating domestic conflict? What supports can we provide to families in crisis? How do we protect children from witnessing violence that will shape their lives for decades to come? This case reminds us that holidays, times traditionally associated with joy and family togetherness, can sometimes mask underlying tensions that explode into violence. Easter Sunday 2025 in Birmingham began as a celebration of renewal and new beginnings, but ended with a family shattered, children traumatized, and a community in mourning. If you're watching this and recognize similar warning signs in your own life or the lives of those you care about, please reach out for help. National domestic violence hotlines, local crisis centers, and community resources are available 24/7. For children who have witnessed violence, specialized trauma-focused therapy can make a profound difference in their healing journey. What happened on Lisa Lane didn't have to end this way. By recognizing the warning signs of escalating violence, connecting those in danger with appropriate resources, and supporting children who have witnessed trauma, we can work toward a future where celebrations remain celebrations, untainted by the violence that transformed Easter Sunday 2025 from a day of joy to one of unspeakable tragedy.